Okay, for the
For records purposes.
for the records purposes, could you please state your name and the position you were in the war?
My name is Peter Richenburg. I was a quartermaster, 3rd class in the United States Navy and part of the Navy Riverine Force, Task Force 117, River Division 91.
So,
Where were you born?
I was born in Boston, Massachusetts.
What made you enlist in the war?
Number of things. My father was a Navy veteran from World War II, and he instilled upon us kids the importance of serving our country. So there was that, and plus I was a restless child, and I wanted to see more of the world. I wanted to serve my country, and I wanted to just satisfy some of my curiosity. So I joined the Navy, not realizing that I would eventually be involved in the war.
We're bad at this.
yeah, we are,
What is the first image that would come to your mind if someone says the word Vietnam?
Interesting question. Chaos, heat, suffering.
How close were you to the others of your unit? How close were you to the others in your unit?
Friendship-wise,
Yeah.
extremely. People often ask, why you put yourself at peril, especially in a combat situation. And people have often asked why or how people perform extraordinary or put themselves at extraordinary risk and peril. And it really isn't for love of country or anything like that. It's basically for each other. And the cohesiveness of us as a group certainly fostered that kind of behavior. Basically, it was a matter of looking after your brothers and knowing that they were looking after me. So I would say the closeness was unbelievably close, almost indescribable. Mighty cables joined us as a group.
What were your thoughts when you were drafted?
I wasn't drafted.
Or when you were
I
told
enlisted.
that you were going to war?
I enlisted, and basically I wanted to see the world. I was really interested in being in the Navy. My first tour of duty was on an aircraft carrier. I was on the aircraft carrier Independence, and well, it was a fantastic job. Part of my duties was navigation. I was on an air-conditioned bridge watching flight ops and airplanes, and the aircraft carrier is just a fascinating ship to be on. And I pretty much thought that was going to be my my tour of duty. I was with a group of people that I enjoyed being around, and I remember one day sitting up on the bridge. We were in the Mediterranean, the island of Malta, of all places, And well, the expression is in the Navy, we're fat, dumb, and happy. And that's pretty much what I was, fat, dumb, and happy, sitting on the bridge of an aircraft carrier. And I remember the yeoman coming up and sliding a manila envelope across the table. And I asked him, I said, "What's this?" And he goes, "You're going to Vietnam, boy." I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Yeah, your job, my rating in the Navy was navigation, and apparently the Navy Riverine Force was being formed at the time, and they needed people who could read maps and navigate small boats up the rivers." So away I went.
Can you describe for us what your training was like?
Yeah, I can. Basically, the training for the Riverine Force was very similar to the training that the Navy SEALs went through. It wasn't obviously nearly as intense, but it was conducted by the same people. We were basically trained by Marines and Navy SEALs. It was a 6-week program in Little Creek, Virginia. And we spent extensive time in weapons training. We learned to operate and fire everything from a 45 caliber pistol, actually a 38 caliber pistol, to a 50 caliber machine gun. Another part of our program was hand-to-hand combat. We learned, we spent 2 weeks in intense training learning how to parry, how to basically handle ourselves in a combat hand-to-hand situation. A big part of the training was also SEER training, survival, escape, and evasion, and they put us out in the woods of Virginia for 2 weeks. We had to forage. They gave us nothing but a rabbit and some twine and basically sleeping bags and things like that. And we had to learn how to forage. We thought it was kind of ridiculous that we're learning to forage in the forests of northern Virginia. We were wondering how that was going to help us in the jungles of Southeast Asia, but nevertheless it was what they had us do. Part of the training was also we were captured and sent to a mock POW camp where we were stripped of our clothing, stripped of our dignity, and got a pretty good look at what it would be like to be a POW. It was, in a few words, harrowing. We were thrown in ice water, mud up to our necks, beaten, made to perform our dignity was stripped, basically. I don't want to get into any gory details, but it was harrowing, but it really gave us an idea of what it was like should we be captured. We also had a chance to evade and escape. We tried and escape, but we were rounded up rather quickly, and for our efforts, severely treated in severe terms would probably be a good way of putting it. As far as our training was concerned, we felt as though we had a pretty good idea of what things were going to be like, but there is a huge disparity between training and reality.
So, can you explain to us about the boat?
This is can you see it on the camera?
Yep. We can see it. I can see it on this one perfectly.
Okay.
This is a PBR, a patrol riverboat. In Navy parlance, it would be patrol boat river. Basically, I spent time on one of these, and I don't have a model of it, but there are some pictures in the books of the ATCs that we were involved in. And basically, our job was sampan duty when I was in Vietnam. We wore these little hats, and you can see the sampan on the hat. And part of our job was to intercept supplies coming down from the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was basically a supply line from China to South Vietnam, and it was basically the supply line that the Viet Cong used to fight the guerrilla war that we were engaged in. Part of our job was to intercept supplies that came down. It was basically ineffectual. All the supplies moved at night. We basically patrolled in the day. So anything that was coming down really was sneaked through lines at night. Although we did manage to intercept a sampan that was loaded with contraband, and I can explain that to you. Do you want me to explain this to you now?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
As I said, most of the supplies that were moved down the Ho Chi Minh Trail were moved down at night, and basically we operated in the daytime. Unbelievable conditions, 105, 110 degree temperatures, beating sun, or during the monsoon season it would be 95 degrees, 100% humidity, and then we would get torrential rain periodically. Just the conditions were less than comfortable. But anyway, our job was to intercept everything that came down the river and check for papers and check things over for contraband. And most of the river traffic were just families that lived on the river going from point A to point B. Fishermen, families, some merchants, and whatnot. It was fairly easy to spot a boat or a sampan that was suspect. And basically, if a family was aboard, a mother, father, kids, grandparents, and the Vietnamese basically had extended families. So when they were moving in their boats or they're going from one place to the other, everybody came along. And generally they were just people going from point A to point B. Occasionally you'd see a boat that was filled with nothing but guys. And sometimes they were fishermen, but usually if we inspected their hands, we could pretty much figure out what their job was. If their hands were dirty and scarred and their fingernails caked with dirt and they had scar lines from lines on their hands and rough hands, those are generally the fishermen. If people came down and they had soft, clean hands with clean fingernails, we kind of figured, well, maybe these weren't river people. One such sampan was intercepted, and it was actually just as we were finishing up for the evening, and the sun had gone down, it was dark, and we were just finishing up our patrol. We were spinning around, and one of the guys on the PBR thought he saw some movement on the distant shore. So usually it could have been anything. It could have been a turtle, maybe large fish, or even a log or something like that. But for some reason we decided to inspect it, and revealed a green painted sampan with some reeds on top, and in it were 5 guys that were obviously not fishermen. So we figured that was kind of fishy, but there was nothing. The boat was the sampan was virtually empty. So we were climbing aboard, checking it out, and I actually have a picture of the sampan. Can you stop the camera for a second?
We're not allowed to.
Oh.
Yeah.
I can get a picture of the sampan.
I can take a picture of it with the camera after the interview,
Okay,
and then I can use it for our presentation.
Good, let's do that. When we inspected the sampan, we didn't find anything. Just these 3 guys that were acting nervous, and actually there were 5 guys. 3 of them were acting extremely nervous, and 2 of them seemed kind of detached. And they just didn't look right. So we started poking around the boat, and one of the guys tripped, and a board came loose. And we picked up the board, and underneath these floorboards of the sampan, it was very cleverly concealed, was an operating room. They had a cot, an autoclave, which is a sterilizer that worked off of a generator, medical supplies, scalpels, bandages, anything that you would need to perform an operation. Basically what this was, it was a mobile hospital that the Viet Cong had for treating their wounded. And these guys were, we figured some of them were doctors and some of them were nurses. Obviously they didn't have papers or anything like that, so we really didn't know. And here's the thing that we found most interesting. All of the equipment, every bit of the equipment on the sampan was American. So that's interesting. Where did they get all this stuff? Obviously, I'm aware of this, but the black market flourished in Vietnam, and the origin was of great concern to our to the leadership. Well, anyway, we got on the radio and basically explained what we had, and they said, "Well, you've got to take the 5 detainees and take them to this." We thought they were going to just take it back to our basic to our base, but they wanted us to take them down to another base that we knew was there, but weren't sure what it was in south of Saigon. I forget the name of the river, but it was in this little town called Na Bay. They wanted to take us to the. They said, tow the boat, take the detainees, restrain them, and take them to this coordinate, which was a long ways away. And this was at night now. Night was just coming down. So we had these guys all night. It took us all night to get from where we were to the base in Na Bay. And we got there just at around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, because the sun was up. Took us all night to tow it there. And when you take the boats at night, you got to. There's no lighting on the river. There's no navigation aids and stuff like that. You really have to be careful. You can run into anything. So we got them to Na Bay, and we were pretty sure the guys that came out were CIA. They just didn't look like sailors or whatnot, so we figured they were spooks. And we turned the, that's a new term for CIA. Anyway, we turned the detainees and the sampan over to the authorities, and that was the last we saw of the detainees, the sampan, or anything. And there was the guys that met us had very little to say. They're very tight-lipped, and the nice part about it was we were out all night. We radioed back and said, we're only about a click up from Saigon. And they said, take the rest of the day off, go anchor out in Saigon and enjoy yourselves. So that worked out pretty well for us.
All right. Can you describe for us maybe your most frightening moment in the war?
We were sitting on the back of a boat, chatting with my friend Ed, and we're just talking, and we heard this kind of a snap, 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 snap sound. Oh, it was maybe couple 100 yards away on the opposite shore. Remember, some of these rivers are extremely wide and some of them are fairly narrow. This was a fairly narrow part of the river. It was maybe only 800 or 900 feet across. And we heard this snap, snap, snap sound. Turned, and we heard this. A bullet went between the two of us, and I was sitting no further than than you were, actually closer, and between the two of us. So we immediately hit the deck, and our boat captain, this guy named Ferdy, swung the boat around, ordered me up on the 50. Eddie grabbed I was on the twin 50, Ed was on the single 50, and we were going to return fire. But by the time we turned the boat around, there was nobody there, so it was just harassment fire. But yeah, having a bullet go between the two of us was a little different experience.
What did you do in the rare downtime you had?
The downtime?
Yeah.
Slept. Mostly. There was a lot of drinking and drugs that went on in Vietnam, but when we were on patrol, I don't know how it was in the Army, but we were clean and sober and ready for combat, only because we felt like we owed that to each other. There was some liberty. We had a little small community that sprung up around our base that provide the basics. You can go have a beer and a shave and a haircut and whatnot. When we were in Vung Tau, there were places you could visit, restaurants and things like that. Once in a while, you'd get up to Saigon, and again, when we dropped those detainees off, we had a whole day in Saigon, which was kind of fun. But for the most part, I made models. I did some drawing. We had a little ship's newspaper that would on the main ship, and I was an illustrator for that. But it was mostly that. Write letters from home. Write letters home. Check your mail and that sort of thing. But mostly we were exhausted. Patrol was absolutely harrowing.
What was a typical day like?
A typical day was interminable boredom, especially on the rivers. One person, I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson, don't quote me on him, but I think he described war as times of interminable boredom punctuated by periods of intense terror. And that was pretty much it. I didn't see all that much combat action. I was only in actual combat 4 times where we actually exchanged fire. Most of it was sampan duty. Sometimes we would escort ATCs and APCs up to certain rendezvous points, or we'd drop off long-range reconnaissance teams and things like that. But it was hot and boring.
Can you describe for us a typical meal that you would have?
Yeah. We had what they called sea rats, were sea rations, and they were basically combat meals in boxes. And of course the joke was our skipper would say, if you guys keep complaining about the sea rats, you complain too much, we're going to bring the cooks up. So yeah, we ate pretty much out of boxes when we were out. When we get back to the base, the smaller bases really didn't have too much. The larger bases had obviously a mess hall, and we could actually have regular cooked food and whatnot. But yeah, most of it was just combat meals that we were able to eat out on the boat. Occasionally, we would smuggle beer out, and 5 guys with 5 cans of beer was okay. Sometimes a cold beer was good, but the way we kept it cold is for some reason there was a 120 millimeter mortar that they had on the boat, and they was absolutely useless from a pitching boat. You could set a mortar up, but apparently they had it there with the supplies in case someone on shore needed to do some close fire support or whatever. Well, anyway, we found that the 120 millimeter mortar barrel, you could fit 6 beers in it, and if you took CO2 and sprayed it down with CO2, it would get the beer really cold. So whenever we go out on patrol, we'd smuggle a 6-pack, load it in the mortar round, and frost it down, and we'd have one cold beer while we were out, which, believe me, was fantastic, especially when it's 108 degrees. Well, every time we'd come back off patrol, we'd be out of CO2, and they would say, "What are you guys doing out there? You know, you're out on patrol and you need a new fire extinguisher every time you come in." Well, you know how it is out in the field. You know, you get fires and everything. It's just crazy out there in the field. Well, somebody tipped them off, and they found out that's how we were keeping the beverages cold. So one day we came back. Of course, we needed a new CO2 fire extinguisher, so we went through rec. And the requisition officer came with dry chemicals. He says, wait, well, what's this? And he said, well, we're no longer issuing CO2 to you guys. You guys are getting dry chemicals. And we kind of looked at him, and he goes, "We know what you guys are up to." And that's all that was said. Kind of a funny story.
What was life like after the war?
I saw things at 19 years old that people should never see in their lives. Just stuff I don't want to get into any great details. It was not necessarily during combat, but it was aftermath. And those periods remain with a person. I will say this, though. When I left Vietnam and I left the service, it filled me with a resolve to continue my education. And I learned at a young age, and it was a great lesson, I think, for everyone to learn, that the world doesn't owe me a living. Life is basically what you put into it. People are what this world is all about, and just simple tenet, treat people the way you want to be treated. And I brought those values with me from the war, and they have served me well as a teacher for the last 35 years or so. I think strengthened my values more than anything. I can tell you one little story that really humanized things for me. There was a section of the river that the Viet Cong had pretty much control of. And any time naval vessels or ATCs or troops went by this certain point, there was a good chance that they would get harassment fire. It was a very dense, foliated area. And this was shortly before they introduced Agent Orange, so they couldn't defoliate large areas. And burning areas of the jungle was done. They had this thing, they called them ronsons. It was, a ronson is a cigarette lighter, and it was a flamethrower. And they would periodically burn areas of the jungle to try to expose things. But the jungles in Southeast Asia, or especially during the rainy season, a bamboo plant will grow 4 to 5 inches a day, and in no time the jungle would grow back. So anyway, there was this one point. It was an elevated point. We would get harassment fire, And sometimes he would and sometimes he wouldn't, but it was an area that we took note of. Anyway, we're bringing some ATCs up. We got some recoilless rifle rounds from that area.